Today we're going to learn the Mishnah Berura in the beginning of Siman Tafrei Shadi Beis, the halachas and Megillah, very relevant, applicable information regarding the brachas and other halachas. Shulchan Aruch says, "Hakoyrei es Megillah mavorech lefanei shalosh brachos." Someone who reads the Megillah has to say three brachas beforehand. Now, Mikra Megillah Shas Nisim, as we already learned, you say the bracha Al Mikra Megillah Shas Nisim. Third one, of course, is going to be Shechianu. The question is, Shechianu during the day, is this done or not? We'll see momentarily. Shulchan Aruch continues and says, "Ubiyoim eino chaz mevarach shechianu." During the day, you don't return and say shechianu a second time. That's according to the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch, which is based on the Torah, which we learned in the past, based on the opinion of the Rambam. And the reason that we saw in the Beis Yosef, the basic reason explaining the Rambam is because you already said it at night. Why do you need to say it again during the day? This is going to be similar to Lulav or Sukkah. Rather, on Sukkot, you said the bracha shechianu at night. That's enough. You don't need to do it again. The Ramah argues, however, some say that even during the day you have to say the bracha of Shechianu. That's Rabbeinu Tam. That's the Rosh. All this is quoted in the Torah. And that's the custom in all of these countries to say Shechianu again during the day. The Mishnah Berura says that we say Shechianu v'na'achoin. It is correct. V'na'achom lachavin. Bibircha Shechianu galma mishlach manus usudas Purim shehim gamkin mitzvahs is correct that a person should have in mind on the bracha of Shechianu, also on the Mashalach Manos, and on the Suda, on the meal on Purim. Sheim Gamkin mitzvahs, which are also mitzvahs. So this is the Mishnah Berura quoting the Magen Avram, who left out Matanas Levyonim. The Pri Megadim included Matanas Levyonim and said that you should have that in mind. He doesn't quote any of this in the Sharat Tziyun. The before we continue in this Mishnah Berura, the Oz V'Hadar Mishnah Berura picks up on this nuance over here. Look at the Oz V'Hadar Mishnah Berura. It says you should have in mind the Mashalach Manos and the Suda Purim, which are also mitzvahs. The Shechion and Megillah is going to cover those mitzvahs. Comes Oz V'Hadar Mishnah Berura. Pri Megadim Sham Hiskim Mashalach Manos B'Tanas Sevyonim. V'Hish Mitzuda. The Pri Megadim mentions you should have in mind when you say the Shechianu on the Mishalach Manos and B'Tanas Sevyonim, but he doesn't mention the Suda of Purim. What?
Doesn't give any reason.
No, he doesn't give any reasons. If you but they make this point, which I saw after we learned this together. I made the point.
Wait, who's the Mechaber of the Oz? Who's the Mechaber of the Oz V'Hadar?
It's a bunch of Talmidei Chachamim, not one person. So I mean, we already made this point when we learned this Pri Megadim and Magen Avram. It's good to see that they also pointed it out. They don't have a whole Torah on it, but if you are more interested in this, then you should look at the Dirsha Mishnah Berura. They quote from the Chuvas Van Hagos over there and others, who tries to say Pshat in the Magen Avram, but doesn't end up saying Pshat really in the Pri Megadim. The Mishnah Berura continues and says, you should tell this to the Chazan who is making the bracha. Tell this to the Baal Koirei, who's saying the bracha, that he should have in mind that the Shechianu is going to cover the other mitzvahs of the day. Because you need kavana from the person who is listening and who is doing the talking, the announcing. Should have in mind this bracha of Shechianu during the day, because the time is during the day. In other words, number one, we see the idea that both the Baal Koirei has to have this intention in mind when he is saying the bracha. Number two is we see this idea of that this should be done during the Shechianu, specifically of the day, because the Shechianu of the day is when all these mitzvahs are happening during the day. Misha, this is obviously referring to those who do say Shechianu during the day. Misha in lo Megillah, if someone doesn't have a Megillah, lo yavarach Shechianu or Mishlach Manos Usuda. Do not say the Shechianu on the Mishlach Manos and on the Suda. Zehu davar hanoi b'kol yom b'kol Shabbos v'yom tov. If you don't have a Megillah, don't say Shechianu on the Mishlach Manos and the Suda. Because this is something that's done every single day and every single week, every Shabbos and Yom Tov. So but some say it's fitting to make the bracha of Shachianu during the day because of the strength of the miracle that happened. The Kevan, excuse me, the Kevan de Mizman Lizman Ka'asi, and since this comes from time to time, this is like any Yom Tov that we make the bracha on it, Aleim Zman of Shachianu. See the Ber Halacha. In other words, we have a machlokes over here. We have two different opinions. Either if you don't have a Megillah, you wouldn't be saying Shechianu because the Megillah was only established to say, because the Shechianu, was only established to say on the actual Megillah. Or that no, you have to say Shechianu for the Yom Tov itself because of the strength of the miracle. And it would be no different than any other Yom Tov. And therefore, even if you didn't have a Megillah, you need to recite this. So you have two different opinions over here. However, if a person had a Megillah at night and said the Shechianu at night, everyone agrees you don't need to say it again during the day. Or if you go like the opinion of the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch who say that you don't say Shechianu again during the day. So if you already said Shechianu during night, you don't need to say another one during the day. The Mishna Berura continues and says, "Im avel koder es Megillah yevarach acher habrachos." If an avel, someone who is in mourning throughout the year for his son, daughter, brother, sister, spouse, or father or mother, so if he's in mourning, according to the Mishnah Berurah, he's allowed to lay in the Megillah. He's allowed to be Baal Koreh. However, someone else should say the brachas. Why? Mishum bircha Shechianu, because of the bracha of Shechianu. She'in avel mevarach lohoitzi rabim bebircha Shechianu. An avel cannot say there's bracha of Shechianu to fulfill the obligation of other people. The avel yikra es Megillah. The avel, he himself will read the Megillah. So obviously, if the avel is by himself, he would say Shechianu. We see this is talking about in a group setting in a sibur congregation. We see a parallel halacha to this in Siman Tafresh Ayin Aleph towards the beginning of Hilchos Chanukah, which is that an avel would not if he's davening on Chanukah and on Mincha Marv, he would not light the menorah on the first night specifically. Why? So he won't say Shechianu because Shechianu is happiness. We find this in other places as well. So by himself, he not only can, but he should when he's at his house. But this is talking about in a public sort of setting.
This applies also for Shloshim.
Yeah.
What about
Even your base Chodesh applies. So Kal V'chomer it applies Shloshim.
what about the 7 days of Shiva?
7 days of Shiva, he's not in shul anyway, he's at home, but he still shouldn't be doing the Shechianu.
He has to lay the Megillah.
Yeah, he still shouldn't be saying doing the Shechianu if he's laying.
I'm saying the other's allowed to read the Megillah. But
Okay, we're going to get to the reading. According to the Mishnah Berura, simple explanation of this Mishnah Berura, simple reading, you can't argue the other way, is that he could read the Megillah. It's no problem whatsoever. We'll have to see what others say about that. But this is the Mishnah Berura, so we have a few very interesting things over here. The before we go into the Ber Halacha, they point out over here is that if you don't have a Megillah, you don't say Shechianu on the Mishalach Manos and the Suda because it's something that's done every single day. Meaning, even though it's not done every single day, nevertheless, it's something that's common, and therefore they didn't establish a bracha on this. We're gonna go through this interesting Ber Halacha over here regarding to Shechianu. But beforehand, first, some say that no, you should say Shechianu on the actual day. You wouldn't say it on the other mitzvahs of the day, but you have to for the day itself. So that's basically the discussion over there. Before we go into the Ber Halacha, there's a very interesting footnote regarding saying brachas on general on the other mitzvahs of Purim. This is a complete tangent because obviously this is going to come up when we learn the halachas of Mishalach Manos, Matanos Lavyonim, and Suda. But nevertheless, the footnote is over here, so I'd just like to share some thoughts on it, and I think that there's one interesting insight at the end that is very important. We're saying over here that we wouldn't say Shechianu on the mitzvahs of the day. That's what we're saying over here. It would be for the actual day itself, but the other mitzvahs you wouldn't be saying Shechianu on. If you're already saying Shechianu on the Megillah, so then it's covered. But these other mitzvahs of the day, aka Meshalach Manos Matanis Avyonim and the Suda, are not powerful enough to require the recitation of a special Shechianu. Furthermore, these other mitzvahs of the day aren't strong enough to require an actual bracha on the mitzvah itself. There's an idea, there's a concept of any time that there's not a bracha on an actual mitzvah, then there's not going to be a shechianu on the mitzvah as well. Think about that for a moment. Think about, is there any mitzvah that you wouldn't recite a bracha on, but you would recite a shechianu on? The answer is pretty much no. The question is, why is there no bracha on these mitzvahs? Don't say it's because it happens quite often. Because V'lo biyom adul ziknu alayim bracha v'lechayra al ze ein loimer mishum shehem nohagim b'kol yom v'kol Shabbos v'yom tov she'aval devarim hanogim b'kol yom tiknu bracha. We have other mitzvahs that we do on a daily basis, and we still say a bracha on it. So don't say that that's the reason over here. That's only a good reason why we don't say shechianu, because shechianu is from time to time. So perhaps since every single day a person eats, even though it's not a mitzvah, so to say, therefore they didn't establish a bracha on that, even though you're fulfilling a mitzvah. That's by eating. The Purim Gadim says they didn't establish a bracha on Mishloach Manos. Why? Based on the Rashba. The Rashba in the Shilos and Chuvos, well-known Rashba in Simin Yerches, says you don't say a bracha on the mitzvah staka. Why? Because it's totally b'dei acherim. It's dependent upon someone else. It's not dependent upon the one who's giving the money. It's also dependent upon the recipient, the one who's receiving the money. It could be that he's not going to want that small amount that you're offering him. Or he wants more, even if it's a large amount, but he wants even more. And therefore, he won't be satisfied. So therefore, any mitzvah that it's possible that it could get uprooted because there's a second party involved, for example, staka, it's already akuro, it's considered as if it's already uprooted, and therefore you wouldn't recite a bracha on that. That's the Pri Megadim quoting the Rashba, well-known idea. This is the reason, one of the reasons why we don't say the bracha in the mitzvah of Kibbud Avim, as we discussed in the past at length in Parshas Yisro, 8 different reasons why we don't say a bracha on Kibbud Avim. And there are many more reasons than that as well. Those were 8 of my favorite reasons. So you don't say a bracha according to the Rashba on any mitzvah that's dependent upon someone else because they might reject it. The parent might say, I don't need you to serve me. One problem. There's a well-known machloikis for those who learn the topic of Mishloach Manos. If someone rejects a Mishloach Manos that's given, would you still fulfill your obligation? So the Amra, later on in Siman Tafrei Shadi Hesif Dal, it says, you fulfill your obligation. And the truth of the matter is, this is really dependent upon what the reason for giving Mishloach Manos is. We know according to the Trumas Hadeshin in the Shilos and Chuvas and Siman Kuf Yod Aleph, the reason is for the Suda, for the meal. You'll have it for the meal. So obviously, according to that, you didn't fulfill your obligation because he's not using it for the meal. However, according to the Manos Halevi and his parish to the Megillah, towards the end of the Megillah, on this pasuk of Mishloach Manos Yisrael, Rabbi Alkavitz, the author of Lechadodi, the Manos Halevi, says the reason is in order to be marbareus, increase friendship. If you offered someone something, even if you reject it, you still increase friendship. And therefore, you would still fulfill your obligation. It could be that the Ramah is going more like the Manos Halevi. However, the Mishna Berura says otherwise over there. The Achroinim, others, Chacham Sofer, says that no, that you wouldn't be Yotzei. You wouldn't fulfill your obligation. But let's just talk about the Ramah over here. We see that according to the Ramah, who said that you will fulfill your obligation, the fulfillment of the mitzvah is only dependent upon who? The giver, the one who's giving the Mishloach Manos. Since he sent it, he fulfills his obligation, whether it's received or not. They put in parentheses, look at the Mishnah Berurah there in Sivkot Mendalid, and what they quote over there. That's obviously the Chassam Sofer, who says that you would not fulfill your obligation and others. And the reason would be because according to the Truma Sadesh, you're not going to have it for the meal. So the Tumim and Simin Sadi Zayin proves from the Rosh in Ksubas and Simin Yud Beis in the first parak, says that even mitzvah that is dependent upon someone else, they still establish a bracha. And he says accordingly. Why did they say, why is there no bracha in the mitzvah of sukkah? Because that's not a bracha. We don't want it to have to be that now people have to receive and take charity. Obviously, that reasoning has nothing to do with Mishlach Manos. So this is a beautiful reason by the Shalosh Tshuvas Chesed LaAvram, which is, I think, the same author of the Eshel Avram, the Buchacher. According to the Ramah, in Siman Samach Tes, in the Shalosh Tshuvas Chesed LaAvram, according to the Ramah, that the main mitzvah is that a person should be happy in his heart to send something to his friend. So if you want to give to your friend, but your friend doesn't want it, you fulfill your obligation. Consequently, think about this for a moment. The main aspect of the mitzvah, a major aspect of the mitzvah, is the mental thought process, is the machshava. You have to want to give it to someone else. You have to be happy about that. There's no bracha on something that's mental. We learned in Siman Taf Lamed Beis, when we learned the halachas of Bedikas Chametz, that something that is dependent upon the heart, mental thoughts, there's no bracha on that. That's why we don't say, one of the reasons why we don't say bracha on bittul chametz. When we nullify the chametz, we don't say a bracha on that. We only do the bedika. Why? Because it's dependent upon the heart. You don't make a bracha on something that is dependent upon the heart. Consequently, it comes out that we have a beautiful reason as to why we don't make brachas on all these other mitzvahs of matanos avyon and mishalach manos, etc. It's because it's more mental. It's in the heart. You have to want to give it. That's why we don't say the bracha. According to the Rashba, let's just speak this out. According to the Rashba, who says that someone might reject it, doesn't apply over here. Because you would still fulfill your obligation, at least according to the Ramah, even if someone declined your Mishlach Manos. However, according to according to this Chesed Avram, the reason's very, very nice. Reason being because because you have a situation over here in which it's mental, and you don't say bracha on something mental. It's a beautiful explanation. This
What I don't understand. What aspect the aspect of the is mental that he wants to give it to someone?
yeah, you want to give it to someone, even though it was rejected.
Okay.
So similar to Bedikas Chametz, and therefore you wouldn't say bracha. Now, obviously, this doesn't reconcile why we don't say a bracha on the Suda. However, that was really addressed over here. Perhaps because every single day a person has a Suda, they didn't establish a bracha on that, even when you fulfill a mitzvah. And the truth of the matter is, we don't say a bracha on any meal that we have that's a mitzvah. There's no bracha on the Haggadah, right, etc. Any meal that we have, we don't say special bracha on the meal. Something that's done, it's not recognizable. It's one of the reasons why we don't say bracha on kibbutz avim. It's not recognizable that it's a mitzvah because everyone in the world is naturally kind to their parents, or we hope. So that's this whole section of that's this idea over here. Sheds a lot of light on the mitzvahs of the day, and this explains why we would say bracha on the Megillah. Number one, it's not just mental, and number two, it's a totally different situation. It's not dependent on anyone else also. So there's many, all of these reasons would not apply to Megillah. This is basically the story with the Shechianu. The Be'er Halacha discusses a few important points over here regarding Shechianu. Be'er Halacha says, look in the Mishna Berura. I Mishna Berura says, now Mashach Sadni Yisharim in Devar Levar. Some say you should say Shechianu, even if you don't have a Megillah. Huma Mor Uksiya. I looked this up last night. This is the Yabeitz in his commentary to the Torah in his sefer called Mor Uksiya. The Mor Uksiya argues on the Magen Avraham. This is what he says. This is his exact wording. I looked it up last night. Who cares if it's something that's done every single day? The haloi belav mitzvahs shiluach manos uda roy levarach zman alayom. Forget about the mitzvahs of mishloach manos and suda. You have to make a shechianu on the actual day that it's a holiday of Purim over here. V'avshu medivri kabbalah. Sarachizuk kishal Torah v'yoiser b'yichud me'mei takva shal neish ahayabo. And even though it's medivri kabbalah, it's from Nach, it's from Ksuvim, it needs strength like something that's from the Torah itself, from Chumash, because of the strength of the miracle that happened. V'kevan de mizman lizman ka'osi hariyu linyan zek kol ma'adeh hashana kol ma'adeh Hashem. Excuse me, Mishna mavarchen le'amzman. And since it comes from time to time, therefore, it's like any other holiday in which you would say Shechianu on the holiday. Uzman lo ba'ikos del chasa oimna afilu b'shuk. Shechianu, you don't need a cup. You don't need wine, a cup of wine to say Shechianu on it, like before Kiddush. You could say it even in the marketplace. It's for a holiday that comes once in a while. The proof is Yom Kippur. When do we say Shechianu on Yom Kippur?
Candlelighting or shul.
Smack in the middle of nowhere. If Yom Kippur she'im bo achilu shtia, are you making Kiddush on Yom Kippur? No. There's no eating, there's no drinking. El shisa menucha. We say it in the middle of nowhere. Say it in shul, all the men. Messiah Sham and the Mora Uksi over there concludes by saying, Deshapru lechachila man delays le megillah le mismach zman akois sudar kan l'shayim. It's good. Someone who doesn't have a Megillah, he could rely on this, and he could make Shechianu on a cup of wine on Purim at the Suda. That's what the Mor Uksiya says. I can't l'shayna.
What do you say by Hanukkah? Can you just make the
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah. Menorah or
Yeah, that's what we learned this past year.
Didn't we
That's right.
come out?
You wouldn't say Lahad Ner Hanukkah,
What was it?
Shechianu,
Wouldn't you have to see somebody else lighting? Isn't that the scenario that we talked about?
not to do the Shechianu.
No?
If you know that you're going to be lighting before Hanukkah is over, you should wait to do it by lighting. But if not, you could do Shechianu even in the middle of nowhere. Just to go over to the Mishnah Berura and some in Tafrei Shayin Bob for a moment. The Shulchan Aruch says in Sif Gimel, if someone didn't light and he won't light in the future on that night, and they are not going to light for him in his house, when he sees a candle, when he sees a menorah lit, he will say Sha'asa Nisim, and on the first night he will say Shechianu. And if afterwards, on the second night or on the third night he's going to light, he would not return to make those brachas. So that's when he sees it, he would say the Shechianu. If we go down to the Mishnah Berura, and it says, some hold that even if you know that you're going to I don't know if he actually. What is Sif Aleph? If you're lighting on the first night, you say 3 brachos, etc. on Chanukah. And if you didn't say the bracha on the first night, you say it on the second night or whenever you remember. When you remember on the other night, says the Mishnah Berura, when you're lighting, that's what the Lavush says. If you remember it after you already lit the menorah, you wouldn't say a bracha on that night. The Mishnah Berura says. Sharatzion Gimel says, wait a second. Let's say if you remember it after you lit on the 8th night, and then you won't be able to say Shechianu at all. He says that requires research. Because even though we hold Shechianu, you could say even in the marketplace, but because it's going on the actual holiday, so it could apply perhaps over here. It's going on the holiday of Chanukah, that miracles happen. But preferably they said that you should say Shechianu when you light the menorah. And this is his language of the Meiri. This is the language of the Meiri. If you don't have a menorah, and you're not in a place that you could see a menorah, some say that you would make Shechianu, you would make the bracha of Sha'as Nisim and Shechianu on the first night to yourself. Sha'as Nisim you would say every single night. and it appears like this is the halacha, but this requires more research. Says the Shar Tzion after quoting the Meiri. It seems like you would still be able to say Shechianu, even if you didn't have a menorah based on this Meiri. That's what it seems like from the Shar Tzion. He says it requires more research.
You had to light.
I mean, the Meiri clearly articulates this idea of some say you would make the bracha even if you don't have it, and you don't see a menorah. He clearly says that, right? And before he clearly says that it's possible, just like you could say Shechianu even in the middle of the marketplace. So to over here it would be no different. Preferably, they said you do it by lighting, and it seems like the Chafetz Chaim down here in the Shar Tzion is going with this route, but at the end is throwing out a little caution, saying it still requires more research. But from the fact that he's quoting this, it seems like he's going that way. But it's certainly an interesting topic. Nevertheless, back to this Ber Halacha. The Ber Halacha says, "V'gam al etzim timi hasoi shemetal al Magen Avram." The more uksia is a question on the Magen Avram. V'aloi belav mitzvah shiluach manos roi levarach zman al hayom. Without mishloach manos, you have to say Shechianu on the actual holiday of Purim. Lo Eda. I don't know what he's talking about. I didn't understand that. The Efshar, the Gam Magen Avram Moidlas, and even the Magen Avram would agree to that. Al Duhu Ma'yurisha Belayla. He's just referring to you had a Megillah at night. Consequently, you said Shechianu at night. You fulfill your obligation. The Prima Godam del Das Machaber Yoitzi Bircha Shechianu Delilah Mashalach Manos Usudi Yomlo Nehira Vegam Nehita Delishan Magen Avram Lamashman came. Now the Chafetz Chaim is putting in a tangential point that which the Prima Godim said, that according to the Shulchan Aruch and Rambam, who said you only say Shechianu at night, that Shechianu could cover the mitzvahs of the day. He doesn't like that. Aval imo hayelo klal efshar degam moide. But if you didn't have a Megillah at all, it's very well possible, says the Chafetz Chaim in the Ber Halacha over here, the Magen Avram would agree that you would need to say Shechianu, even if you didn't have a Megillah at all. After our words, I found that the Berurah Yosef says as follows: if you don't have Megillah, you say Shechianu. But don't say the bracha of Sha'asa Nisim and the bracha of Haravis Yirveinu. Don't say those brachas. So you clearly see the Berurah Yosef holds that you would say Shechianu if you didn't have Megillah, but you wouldn't say Sha'asa Nisim and Haravis Yirveinu. The obvious question is, obviously you wouldn't say Al Mikra Megillah, it goes without saying, but why wouldn't you say Sha'asa Nisim? It's similar to Shechianu, it's going on the miracles of the day. But anyways, we see from the Berurah Yosef that you would still say Shechianu. Aval achronim kozvu degam Shechianu lo yivarach. Says the Berurah Yosef, the achronim say, if you don't have Megillah, you wouldn't say Shechianu. Ad kan l'shoinu, until here's the wording of the Berurah Yosef. Concludes the Ber Halacha. The Ber Halacha concludes and says, "V'lo eda be'ez achronim motza din zeh." I don't know which achronim he found this halacha in. Levad, except for the Magen Avram and the Lirabba Sheitiku. The Magen Avram and the Lirabba were quoted before. Umehem mein raya. No proof from them. Kabosha chazavnu v'sarchli in the ma'isa. No proof from them. Like I said above, this requires more research. Look in Vayin La'el Simin Tafresh Ayin Vav B'Shar Tzion Oz Gimel. Oh, that's funny. That was the Shar Tzion that we just saw. Look earlier in that Shar Tzion, the one that we just pulled up on the screen. So
if you don't have a Megillah, you would say
over there, it's alluding to the over what he's alluding to at the end of the Ber Halacha is obvious. That just like what he was leaning towards in the Shar Hatzion over there, but he said that requires more research, which is you probably would still say it. But nevertheless, in the Mishna of Berura, you didn't want to tell people that. You didn't want to tell that to people. In the Ber Halacha, okay, but in here, he clearly says if you had a Megillah at night and says Shechianu, everyone agrees you wouldn't need to say a new one during the day. Interesting language. Everyone agrees.
Mm-hmm.
But if you didn't, not so simple. So I'll have to tackle more of this tomorrow.
Okay.
I'll have to continue with this. This is good stuff, yeah. All right, everyone have a wonderful day.
Yeah.
Yeah.